Thea was chiseling a particularly bitey mimic off the side of a bakery when the gods began to scream. She tried to get the little brick skeuomorph off the brickwork gently at first, tried luring it off with food, forcing it off with tuning forks, and even sprinkling it with noxious powders. But the creature was God's cursed stubborn. It had nipped the fingers of at least 3 or 4 passers-by, so it clearly couldn't stay where it was. But Thea would have been happy to transplant it away from the street. Its species never got bigger than a few inches, so it's not like it could seriously hurt anyone. But the mimic refused to give up its grasp on the brickwork, jabbing at her with its nidosites while flailing its chromatophoric membranes and skeletal lattices until regulations demanded Thea kill it. It wasn't hard. Just took a quick stab with her belt knife the next time she tricked it into opening up with her tuning fork. Thea was justifiably proud of her high success rate at transplanting mimics, so she couldn't help but be angry at herself for not being able to handle a finger-length brick skeuomorph. She just sheathed her knife, and that sense of failure, hardly the only one, of course, was lingering over her when the gods began screaming. The screams traveled through the firmament and weren't audible to the human ear. But every single person on the bustling street with God gifts, so everyone except small children, clutched at their ears anyway. It was easy to tell who had indwelling gods inside their souls, because every one of them staggered, often falling to the ground. Thea crashed to her knees as Seno, the god of counting flagstones, screamed wordlessly inside her head. And then the tiny god started screaming a second time simultaneously when Thea stepped on a crack between flagstones as she climbed back to her feet. Thea had no idea how Seno could scream twice at once, but moving her foot off the crack was automatic, the second scream ending instantly when she did so. She didn't even need to look. One of the blessings he offered her was extrasensory awareness of all flagstones near her. That blessing was so close to solidifying into a proper boon. She expected it to do so any week now. It would be only her second boon after her old trajectory calculation boon. Of course, the only real difference between blessings and boons was permanence. Blessings could only be used a single time, or for a limited period of time, unless actively sustained by a god. What a huge difference that was, though. Both god gifts were pressed into use as Thea took off sprinting in the direction of the screams, the blessing to guide her feet, the boon to guide her through the crowd. She realized she was still holding the tuning fork she'd used on the little mimic and quickly tucked it into her bandolier with the others as she ran. "What's going on?" a man demanded of her, but she just shook her head and ran past. It was easy enough to track the god screams, given how oppressively they cascaded from the west. Before Thea had run more than a few dozen spans, she got another solid clue about the source of the screams in the form of an explosion. Thea picked up the pace. "And now you're running towards the explosion," she muttered to herself. "Not your job, but you're doing it anyway." Even with her 2 sensory god gifts active, Thea found herself slowing as the confused crowd panicked and fled from the explosion. Not far ahead, a knot of people was approaching rapidly, and Thea's trajectory boon couldn't see a single path through them. "You ready, Seno?" she asked. The little god burbled excitedly back at her, while still screaming with his other voice. Thea rolled her eyes, jumped, and performed a miracle.